Hi, everybody. Tammy here, and I wanted to talk about Google Forms. There is so much to talk about with Google Forms. It's a little different from docs or slides. Some of the behaviors are different, so I wanted to dig into Google Forms for just a little while, hopefully address some misconceptions and clarify some issues that come up from time to time. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about, let's just start real basic. How do you create one? You can open up a new tab and just do forms.new and that will start a new form. Or you can do it through your Google Drive. Just go to New and go down to Forms. If you don't see it, you might have to go over to More. So that's how we're going to start. All right, so I've started this Google form here, just talking about forms, and just to kind of play around with some of the settings here. So the first thing I want to talk about is the theme. It's important to me. I'm sure it's important to you and your kids. Just something else to engage the kids. All right, so what we're going to do is, I already had that open. So I'm going to click on the little palette up here for your theme. And you can choose your different colors. And I usually like to do a little header up at the top. And they have some that you can choose from. You've got work and school here. I like that one. You can choose that. It'll insert that little header up at the top and it automatically pulls in some of the colors that is found in that image. And you can choose from there your theme colors, like the colors that are in the little bars. Like I can make that yellow, green, blue. It still kind of goes with the image. And then your background color you can change here as well. Um, Every once in a while, though, I do like to create my own, and very similar to what I do for like Google Classroom. And so I made this one just real fast in Google Drawings. I made it 1600 by 400. That's important to make sure the size is good. Very similar to in your Google Classroom headers. And so that'll pop that up. It will pull out some colors from it and I can change that colors. I can actually add a custom color. So whatever I want to do here. Or I can just make my own choices here. And you can also change your font style down here as well. And basic is basic. So I usually kind of go back and forth between basic and playful. That's up to you. All right, so enough of the theme. Make sure that you give it a title. Usually if you give it the title up here, and then once you click up here, it'll automatically populate. If it doesn't, go ahead and put your title up there. Just make sure you do that first. All right, so now I kind of want to head over into the settings here, into the gear icon over here. And let's talk about some of the things that we have to choose from here. Now, I'm going to always collect email addresses because usually as a teacher, I am using these forms with my students and they're going to be signed into their Google accounts. And I want to collect email addresses and it's up to you whether they get response receipts. I never choose that because the kids usually don't check their email or they're not able to. I restrict it to users in Wills Point ISD and that's just my district. That's up to you as well. Limit to one response. Now, if you limit it to one response, and you need to do this for those grades that they get on the forms to import correctly. If you're using this as a quiz, then you do want to limit it to one response. And then you can also choose edit after they submit, or they can see summary charts and text responses after they submit. I usually never choose those. And then you go up to the presentation part. You can just choose if you want to show a progress bar as they're working through it, or if you want to shuffle the question order. I kind of like doing that. And you can actually change your confirmation message right here. Thank you so much for your input. I just put that in. You can do whatever you want to. Maybe you want to give them further instructions on what to do after they've taken the quiz. And then this is very important. If it is a quiz, you definitely want to go over to this tab and make sure you make this a quiz selected and on. This is locked mode. If you want to choose that, it will lock their tab that they're in for that. And so they're not able to go to other tabs. And then you can also choose how they will see their grade, if they see it immediately after they submit or later after you review it. Sometimes if they've got short answers or paragraph answers, then you have to look at those and grade those before they can get their grade. But if it's all multiple choice, then maybe they can just go ahead and see it right after they submit. And then maybe then go ahead and click Save. All right, then from here, I kind of want to talk real quick about preferences. So what I'm going to do right now is go up to the three dots and just look at some of the things that we've got going on here. You can make a copy, move to the trash, get pre-filled. We'll talk about that in a second. Add collaborators. This is if you are collaborating with other teachers on creating this form, this is where you would add those. That's kind of like the share. But that's when you want to other teachers or other collaborators to use the same form. And then you've got add-ons here. We're not going to go into add-ons right now. Script editor, that's when we're talking about some HTML, getting down to that. We're not going to talk about that. But I do want to talk about preferences real quick. These are your preferences for all the forms that you create. At this point, you may want to click on collect email addresses because sometimes I've had teachers that said, oh, I forgot to put your name on the as a question, which I always do, and we'll talk about that too. But if you say collect email addresses in your preferences, then it's always going to collect email addresses, whether you remember to use it as a question or not. Make questions required. If you find that all of your questions you want required and you're tired of tabbing that over or toggling, then go ahead and just put it right there. And then if you have a default quiz point value, if you find that you have the same point values every time, then you may want to make that change right there. So that's in the preferences. And again, I want to kind of go over just a couple more things here, just to get pre-filled link. So you may not have even noticed it before, but this is if you have a form that is going to a group of students and there is an answer choice, maybe first period, and you want them, and maybe what period are you in is one of the questions, and they are all going to answer that same answer, then you may want to fill that out for them just so they don't mess that up. So you would click on get pre-filled link, or maybe it's a question about you and and you as the teacher. And so you want to fill in that information for them. So when you click that, it'll bring you to the form and it will ask you just to put whatever you wanted pre-filled. So say I wanted to make a link just for my first period, and period 1 is going to be checked. And then I'm going to get that link. And then that's going to be the link that I will use to give to my first period. And when they get the form popped up, it's already going to have first period clicked for them. So that's up to you. And you'll copy that link right there. And then that's the link that you would put in that first period Google Classroom. Okay, so let's get back to the form itself. Just a couple of things that I want to mention about the actual questions that you're filling out here or that you're creating. You need to have a title up here. You do not have to have a form description. And it also has the settings here because I had already checked that I wanted in the settings that I want the emails addresses to be captured. I usually put a first name and a last name as the first questions of my form. And this helps when you're sorting in the spreadsheet responses and you want to sort alphabetically. So I usually have a separate question for first name and last name. If you have just one question for name, then they may put them in differently. And I want to be able to alphabetize by last name. And so it'll kind of save me a step later on when I have to separate that field. Let's see. And then also make sure if you don't already have your questions required in your preferences, then make sure that all the questions you want to make sure they answer, that you make sure that the required is on. All right, so let's talk about some of the types of questions here. I kind of like that when you start with a question and you put in name, then Google automatically says, oh, that's a name, that's going to be a short answer. And so they know what they're going to do, what you're going to need. So I'm going to move this down a little bit. Actually, I'm going to move this one up. You can actually just drag and drop, which is kind of nice. So let's talk about some of the other different kinds of questions here. You got short answer, you got paragraph, multiple choice, check boxes. Check boxes is going to be used if they're going to be choosing several options, like the check all that apply. That'll be in the check boxes. And a drop down is when they're going to choose one option from a list of options. I do want to draw your attention to file upload. So this will allow students to attach a file that they've already completed. So this will come from their Google Drive, and they will just simply have a question that asks for upload. Very cool. So you can make some of the settings right here. You can allow specific types, so you can choose what types you want to do. If you want to limit that, if you want to limit the number of files, I can think maybe sometimes if they are doing some work on a piece of paper and then they want to take a picture of their work, being a math teacher, I know that I want them to show their work. They can take a picture of their work and then they can upload that as an image file. So it's up to you if they want to, if they have several pages, then you may want to up that amount. And then maximum file size, 10 meg, that's pretty big. We don't really want images to be super big. And remember, this is going into your Google Drive. And that's just one of the things that I don't even know if a lot of people understand is there. So I just wanted to show that. So this is just adding a question, but if you want to import questions that you have previously given in another quiz, then this is where you would do that. So you would import questions. It's going to take you to all of your forms, and you would just choose which form you want to choose, and it's going to list real briefly the questions that were in that quiz, and you can just choose um, as many questions as you want. You import them, and then they're going to be in there. And then you can still edit them if you need to. So that's kind of handy. Okay, so after that, what you'll see is add title and description. And this is just going to give you another title bar, not replacing the one up at the top, but just if you have a different section of your quiz, you can go ahead and put that in there. And so it's going to make its own little bar with that title and description. You can add image and add video here as well. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is adding a section here at the bottom. So when you add a section, it will have a certain amount of questions on the page or on the screen that the student will see before they go to another section. And so they'll have to click next to go to another section to see it on the next screen. So one little trick that I saw, because I was trying to help a teacher recently add a little bit more security, because they created a quiz and it was a little bit more high stakes than normal, and she wanted a way to make it more secure. So the first period students weren't sharing the Google form link with the sixth period. And so we came up with this cool little idea about making like a little code. And so if I want to say I want to add a question right here before I get to this next section, I want to say this is the code. And so maybe I just had first name, last name, period, code. And so they had to have a specific code before they could see the questions, and they had to answer it correctly. And so when I put in the word code, not only is it short answer, but response validation has been added. So I need to put in an exact code, and I can put in text, contains, and then I put in secret. It has to be secret. And if they get it wrong, then I can say, nice try. So this is the code that I'm giving my first period, or whenever my students, as they're taking the test, and that will allow them to see the rest of the quiz or test. And the other students, if they don't have the code, because as soon as all my students are in and in that in their test questions, then I'm going to go back and change that code. And so if the other students in other classes are trying to access it, they're not going to get past this. So what I've done is right here, if they get this correct, secret, then it's going to continue to the next section. So it is section 2, but I'm just going to say continue to the next section. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like with the preview eye. Now note that if I have this set up this way to where I have certain questions here and then they have to do a code before they can go to the next one, then I cannot shuffle my question order. So I had to change that in my settings. So if I go to the preview, I see first name, last name. I'm just going to put in just some quick answers here. And what's the important thing? And then here's my code. Now remember, it was secret, but if I accidentally do something wrong, then if I click next, it's going to say nice try. And so I have to put it in correctly. And notice when exactly the time I put it in correctly, nice try is gone. I can go to next. And then this is my next section, the rest of the test. So a cool little tip that I learned recently. Very, very cute. Okay, so you've made your form and you're ready to send it to your students. So the way you would do that is go up to send and you can email it. I usually never email it. I usually always get it right here in the link. And I can shorten it, which I usually do, and then I copy it here. And now I can give that out to the students. And there is another way through Google Classroom, which I'll show you in just a second. So if I go to Google Classroom, I go to classwork, I create an assignment. Don't create a quiz assignment because that's going to create a whole new blank form and you don't want to do that. So here is my intro to forms quiz, and you can add and then just go to your Google Drive and it should be in your recents if you've been working in it, and then you just click on it right there. Now I have the option right here to do lock mode on Chromebooks. I can also add a link, and this sometimes I do it this way. So the link that I just copied a minute ago, I can add a link. It looks a little bit different, as you can see right here. It's loading up. And it says sign in because it's going to just make sure that that is signed in. So it looks a little different, but it's going to take them to the same thing. If you clicked on this one, it would go back to what you're looking at because you're the editor. But if I click on this, then it's going to bring up the form. And also notice you as the editor, if you're signed in, which you always should be, but you're going to notice the little pencil in the bottom right. And that's your ability to edit the form. And the students won't see this. You see this because you are the editor of this form. So I just wanted to show you those two things. I kind of like this method right here, and then I can say locked mode if I want to do that. So just want to make sure we've got our point value, we have our due dates, topics. Make sure you're using topics in your Google Classroom for organization purposes, and then we'll hit assign. You can also make sure you can go to certain students if you want to. So there's that quiz right there. So that's just one of the things that's kind of different about Google Forms, because when you want to share, you can't just click on that link up there up at the top. You have to go to send and get the link there. That's what you're going to provide for the students. So just one of those little quirky things that you learn pretty quick, that you don't want to share what you see. That's the editor's link and not the link that the students will be filling out. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about responses. So you've sent out the quiz in Google Classroom, and the kids have been taking the quiz, and you are able to see the responses within the form, and you're also able to see them in a spreadsheet. So in the responses here, you can see the different tabs here that you are able to look at. I love this summary because it will give you some different charts that you can look at real quick on different questions and kind of see where the kids are struggling. I like that real quick look. You can look at a question at a time and then see how each student answered that question. And then you can look at the individual quizzes right here. Now, if you don't want to look at this and you'd rather look at the spreadsheet, then in the upper right, you'll see the little green icon for spreadsheet. You want to click on that. It will bring up the same title of the form that you've created and then have responses in parentheses at the end. That's usually what you want to do. If you have already created a spreadsheet and you happen to want these results to go to that spreadsheet, then you would click on this one. But usually we're creating a new spreadsheet when we begin. So now that we've created that, and I've had a few submissions already, so here you have your responses in a Google Sheet. And like I said before, it's kind of handy if I want to go by last name, and then I can sort any way that I want to. Notice it captured the email addresses and the timestamps as well. And it will also have the score as well. One note when you are putting the link in Google Classroom is when you add that form, you don't want to add anything else with it, because when the kids complete the form or the quiz and then they hit submit, then it will automatically mark as done. If you have other items, other links and additions added to this post, then it's not going to automatically mark as done when they complete that quiz. So they would have to go back and click on it. So just make sure when you're doing a quiz, just make that one addition in your post and don't put any other items along with that. Okay, so let's talk about responses in a spreadsheet. Now, I've got a couple of spreadsheets here and I've kind of tightened them up a little bit just for privacy issues, but I wanted to show some spreadsheets that I have used the same form. This is the form that I have used for several years in a row. When I'm done taking responses, I can unlink the form right here. So when I unlink the form, then when this form is created, it's not going to go to that spreadsheet anymore. I'm going to have to create another spreadsheet for those responses to go to. Every year, when I start a new season of badges for the form that I created, then I want to unlink the 18-19, that was years 2018, 2019, and then I have 19 and 20. And then I have a new one for 20 and 21, and so I don't have any responses as we begin the new year. So I still have the responses because I unlinked and then I created another form. So this is the new form for 2021. And so hopefully I'll be getting some responses in there really soon. But I wanted you to know that you can unlink the form and keep those responses if you ever need to. Otherwise, you can go into your form and you can delete all responses right here. But you probably don't want to do that until you unlink the form if you want to keep it. Sometimes you just don't need to keep it. So that's up to you. Just want to make sure you are aware that you are able to save your responses in a spreadsheet and then start a new spreadsheet. Or you can delete all responses if you're starting over and you don't need to keep that data. Another thing I wanted to mention, if you're collaborating with other teachers and they are listed as collaborators in the same form, they may want to have their own responses. So they will need to make a copy to have their own copy for their own students. So it'll create a separate form and a separate form response spreadsheet for them to get their responses. So just keep that in mind. However, you are able to use the same form, and then when you are in the spreadsheet, you are able to do some cool things I want to show you real quick. Let me get rid of me. So I've got these responses, and then I've separated them into tabs by campus here. And then when I go to, say, this is the primary campus, I have it in A2. This is a query function, and that means that whenever the teachers filled out the form and they provided one of the drop downs that I had, so they didn't have to type it in. the campuses. So depending on which campus they answered, it's going to throw them in that specific tab. So I'm able to see all of the responses in the first tab, and then I can see each campus responses by tab. So just a quick note, and if you wanted to do that together, collaborating with other teachers, and you wanted to use the same form, but have each other's responses in a different tab, then you would use a query function. Okay, and one last thing I want to mention is about reusing posts in Google Classroom. So if I go to the Google Classroom and I say I want to create and reuse a post. So I had already done a form post in another classroom and I want to reuse it. If I reuse it here, and then if I go to, I'm in this classroom, and if I choose something that had the form in it and I reuse it, I just want to mention that it's going to create a new form and have new responses. I had a teacher the other day who reused the post for another class period, and then she couldn't find the responses. It's because when she reused the post, it created a new form with new spreadsheet responses. And so we just did a quick search in her Google Drive, and there it was, and all of the responses for those students. So just a quick mention that if you are reusing a post with a form in Google Classroom, then it's going to create a new form. Just keep that in mind. So I hope this helped. I know it's a lot of information, a lot to soak in. There's a lot going on here, but a lot of good stuff going on here. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of all the little nuances throughout Google Forms, and especially with Google Classroom. So let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you have a great day.